So these changes in the nervous system result in all kinds of changes in perception and sensation and also cognition. We already talked last time about how there's changes in vision and hearing, and those continue to degrade throughout late adulthood. In addition to that, in late adulthood, you often have changes in taste, smell, and touch as well. So you have a decline in the number of taste buds that are on the tongue, so you become less sensitive to tasting like salt and sweet foods. That leads to a greater difficulty in recognizing familiar foods, and foods just kind of start to taste weird or bland. You also have decline in odor sensitivity, and smell actually plays a really huge role in taste. Like what we refer to as taste is often referred to really as flavor, which is kind of a combination of taste and smell. So you know, all of you have probably had like a cold or something where your nose gets stuffed up and you can't taste things quite as well, and that's because the aromatics of something plays such a huge role in its flavor. And during this time you have a decline in odor sensitivity, so that also contributes to foods not tasting quite the same as they used to. There's a decrease in smell receptors, also loss of neurons in the regions of the brain that process odors. So perception is distorted, but in addition to that, there's a more sort of immediate safety issue that comes from this. So people who are, you know, much older, elderly people, they may not be able to smell like a gas leak, for example. They may not be able to smell smoke if there's a fire in the house. They also might not be able to smell or taste like rancid food, and so they're more likely to get food poisoning. They're more likely to, you know, have all kinds of dangerous things happen because of that decreased sensitivity in smell. So it can be a really serious issue for some people. Some of the effects of these sensory changes, so like I said, there's continued decreases in vision and hearing. Those can lead to loss of self-confidence, difficulties with daily activities. So obviously if you can't see, it's going to be difficult to drive, it's going to be difficult to do a lot of things, and can result in changes in leisure activities. Hearing loss can also contribute to social isolation and loneliness. It's much more difficult to engage in conversation. It may be hard to like call your kids or your grandkids on the phone because you can't hear them. That leads to lower self-efficacy and, like I said, reduced safety and enjoyment. Decreased taste and smell can lead to dietary deficiencies and safety risks. I didn't talk about it too much, but you also have a reduced sensitivity to touch. And that can also lead to difficulties with leisure daily activities that depend on sort of fine judgments and texture and things like that. So some people adapt to these physical changes better than others, and part of this depends on what's called the subjective age of the person. So, you know, physical age is how old someone actually is. Subjective age is basically how old you feel. And most people who are elderly tend to report that they feel younger than they look or than they actually are. And there's kind of two sides of this. So some people want to be younger, they have a desire to be younger, but they don't actually feel younger. And people in that condition tend to have less positive well-being. But if you actually feel younger than you are, then that leads to more favorable well-being. People who essentially can kind of accept some of the physical changes that come with older adulthood, just accept that those are inevitable and not really worried about them too much, and instead focus on the things that they can control, so things like diet and exercise, reducing stress, etc. They tend to adapt to these physical changes much better than someone who's kind of, you know, just dwelling on the past and wanting to be young again. Those with effective coping strategies also tend to do better. So if they, like I said, have prevention and compensation through diet, exercise, and activity, if they feel a sense of personal control over the choices that they've made and sort of how they have become who they are, and also if they use a more problem-centered coping where they focus on, you know, what's a solution that I can come up with to this problem rather than dwelling on kind of the emotional aspect of it, then all that can help. There's vast increases in assistive technologies that can help adapt to these physical changes. You can make changes to the home itself, to the environment. So you, for example, this person environment fit, if you have a house where, I don't know, like the washer and dryer are in the basement, you can move those up to the main floor so that you're not having to walk up and down stairs with, you know, large loads of clothes or whatever. But then, you know, there's all kinds of smart devices and smart home things that help. There's, you know, like smartphones, obviously you can can voice activate them so that you don't have to use vision, you don't have to use touch if you're having impairments in motor skills and things like that. There's just a vast number of smart devices. Some of them help with emergency situations, so they may, detect if someone has fallen over or if there's a fire in the house or something like that, and trigger an emergency system. There's also smart devices that help with remembering things. We'll talk about memory in just a second, but obviously there's declines in memory as you get older. So for example, there's really like smart pill bottles you can buy that whenever you open the lid, it sends a signal to your phone or to like a caregiver's phone to let the person know, okay, this person took their pill for the day. So just a lot of devices that can help adapt to some of these physical changes. And before we move on to talking about cognitive changes, I just want to quickly differentiate two different types of aging. There's what's called primary aging and secondary aging. Primary aging is genetically influenced declines that pretty much every member of a species will experience, even if they have good health. So there's things that are just kind of inevitable that are going to happen because of the way that our genes function and all these aging mechanisms that we've talked about before. So for example, pretty much everyone is going to get gray hair and wrinkles. There's not really much you can do. You can kind of delay that a little bit maybe, but there's not much that can prevent that from happening. In addition to that, there's secondary aging. So secondary aging are declines that are due to hereditary defects and also negative environmental influences. So on top of just the normal things that are going to happen with aging, you may have faster aging or more severe aging if you don't exercise, if you eat a poor diet, things like that. So the effects of secondary aging are more individualized. It's been shown that secondary aging is one of the major contributors to frailty, or basically like weakness. And so if you, again, exercise, eat healthy, all those things, then you're less likely to experience frailty. But obviously diet and exercise probably aren't going to help too much with like gray hair and wrinkles. At least they're not going to prevent it entirely. So you can kind of think of primary aging as just like normal healthy aging. Secondary aging is what happens on top of that because you've made maybe poor life choices that increase the risks of aging.